The dropship descended through curtains of rain, its engines shuddering against the dense atmosphere. Commander Vek'Tor stood near the open ramp, his reflective armor streaked with grime and humidity. Beyond the metal lip sprawled a drowned world, miles of black water and rotting vegetation illuminated by the ship's external lights. The humans had named this moon Delta IV. To the Xel'nari, it was merely another conquered sphere, stripped of meaning and soon to be sterilized. Yet as the craft hovered above the flooded basin, Vek'Tor felt something disquieting coil beneath his carapace, a vibration of instinct that no sensor could quantify. Atmospheric interference at 86%, his adjutant reported, voice clicking through the translator. Thermal imaging is compromised. Vek'Tor flexed his mandibles. Deploy the ground unit regardless. If the last human outpost is hiding here, we finish it tonight. The platoon leapt into the shallows, water swallowing their metal boots with hollow gulps. Drones hummed above, casting cones of blue light that cut through the mist. The commander followed last, his weight sending ripples that vanished beneath the endless drizzle. He had fought a dozen campaigns against the Terrans and considered them tenacious but predictable. They relied on courage where the Dominion relied on precision. Courage was not armor. The swamp smelled of rust and decay. Bulbous trees jutted like broken bones from the mire, their roots slick with bioluminescent algae. Every movement produced faint echoes, enough to scramble the auditory sensors on their helmets. Vek'Tor switched to manual hearing and regretted it instantly. The rain became a roar, and the distant cries of unseen creatures rasped across the water. Still, he pressed forward, forcing composure into his stride. A commander could not afford superstition. Perimeter established, the adjutant announced. No heat signatures within 2 clicks. They hide beneath the surface, another soldier muttered. The humans breathe through reeds. I've seen recordings. Vek'Tor turned his gaze upon the speaker, a younger trooper whose crest trembled slightly. Then watch the reeds, he said. The trooper straightened, chastised. They advanced toward the ruins of a Terran outpost half submerged ahead. Metal spires leaned at crooked angles, drowned in silt. The remnants of banners clung to rusted frames, their colors leached by rain. The commander signaled for a sweep. Drones scattered like insects, their sensors painting the terrain with shifting holograms. For several minutes, the only sound was the monotonous hiss of rainfall and the mechanical breathing of armor filters. Then one of the holograms flickered. A brief pulse, an anomaly, registered and vanished. The technician frowned and adjusted his reader. False echo, perhaps a thermal pocket. Before Vek'Tor could reply, the technician's head snapped backward. A neat hole opened through the visor. The body collapsed silently into the water. The shot had come from nowhere. No muzzle flash, no trajectory trace. Drones spiraled upward, searching, but the fog swallowed everything. Sniper, someone shouted. Vek'Tor raised a clawed hand for silence. His eyes darted across the rippling expanse. Angle of entry, unknown. Projectile velocity exceeds our logs. He crouched beside the fallen trooper, examining the wound. Single entry, no exit. The precision was surgical. Whoever fired had accounted for armor density, movement, and distance in a single breath. A human marksman, then perhaps the last one. A second shot cracked. Another soldier dropped. The squad began to scatter, their training fracturing under the invisible assault. Vek'Tor barked an order that vibrated through their comms. Hold position. Activate full spectrum sweep. Static flooded the channel. Drones emitted a high-pitched whine as their feeds collapsed one by one. It was as if the swamp itself had swallowed their technology whole. Vek'Tor's earlier unease solidified into something colder. He had expected resistance, not a ghost. Lightning flared, bleaching the world in white for an instant. In that momentary glare, he thought he saw movement, a faint silhouette rising from the water, then sinking back before his mind could register detail. His heart thudded. He recalibrated his optics, but the field remained empty. Only the rain moved, "Commander," the adjutant whispered. "Recommend withdrawal until orbital support." "No," Vek'Tor cut him off. "One human remains. We eliminate it and complete the purge." His voice sounded more mechanical than usual, stripped of conviction. He knew it, and so did his troops. They began advancing again, slower now, weapons raised. Each footstep stirred concentric rings across the murky surface. The swamp reflected their armor lights like fragmented stars. For every meter gained, their confidence eroded. The silence between thunderclaps became unbearable. Then another drone feed blinked alive on Vek'Tor's visor, just for a second. It showed the outline of a figure half submerged, motionless, rifle poised atop a floating branch. The image pixelated, distorted, and vanished. He froze, calculating the coordinates. "Left quadrant," he hissed, spinning the target. Nothing. The swamp exhaled a quiet bubble, then returned to stillness. A flash erupted to his right, another shot, another casualty. The water's surface rippled with impact. The troopers opened fire blindly into the dark, their plasma bolts hissing as they struck water, and steam exploded around them. Vek'Tor clenched his jaw. Every burst of light revealed more confusion, more fear. "Cease fire," he roared, but his command was drowned by the storm. He realized, too late, that the enemy was controlling the tempo, forcing them to expend energy to reveal positions. The human was not running. The human was hunting. He felt an emotion he had not experienced since his first campaign, a primitive tremor of vulnerability. The Dominion's doctrines insisted that fear was a defect of lower species, yet here it was, threading through his nerves. Each raindrop felt like the pressure of a crosshair against his skin. He switched to private comms, voice low. "All units, triangulate the first shot's origin. I want confirmation of terrain elevation." "Impossible, Commander," came the reply. "The swamp shifts with every rainfall." He stared into the mist and saw his reflection on the water, distorted and quivering. A ripple crossed it, and for a moment he imagined another face below his, a human's, pale and relentless, watching. He blinked, breaking the illusion, but the chill remained. Something splashed behind him. He turned sharply, weapon raised. Only a fragment of armor drifted by, its previous owner gone without sound. The realization struck him. The human wasn't stationary. It was moving through the swamp itself, merging with it, choosing when to strike. Vek'Tor's breathing quickened. He forced discipline into his limbs and gestured the squad into a defensive circle. The rain thickened, hammering against their helmets. The swamp responded with low gurgles, as if laughing beneath them. "Commander," the adjutant whispered again, "we are blind." Vek'Tor scanned the endless dark. "Then open your ears," he said. The human must breathe. Yet even as he spoke, he doubted his own logic. The Terrans had always found ways to make impossible things routine. Minutes passed. No more shots. Just rain, endless and patient. The soldiers began murmuring prayers to the Dominion Corps, voices trembling. Vek'Tor wanted to silence them, but his throat had gone dry. Then came the faintest ripple ahead, a line of disturbance gliding across the surface toward them. He lifted his rifle, following it with his scope. The line stopped, vanished. Thunder rolled. A shot cracked through the storm, striking a tree trunk inches from his head. Bark exploded. The commander dropped into the water, mud engulfing him. When he surfaced, the others were already firing wildly again, their formations shattered. "Where's the shooter?" he whispered, more to himself than to his troops. No one answered. The only reply was the rain, unending and absolute. Far beyond their circle, something moved unseen through the reeds, preparing its next breath. The rain had become her camouflage. Each droplet masked a breath. Each ripple disguised her movement. Sergeant Lira Morgan lay half-submerged in the swamp, the barrel of her rifle resting atop a slick branch. Mud caked her arms, her face, even her eyelashes, turning her into something less than human, something the Xel'nari scanners would overlook. Her heartbeat had slowed to a metronome of patience. Through the faint glow of her cracked visor, She watched the alien platoon stagger through the mire like beasts out of their depth. The commander moved among them, silver armor gleaming faintly beneath the storm. He carried himself with precision and arrogance, and Lira marked him immediately. Leaders always walked as if the ground belonged to them. Her rifle's scope flickered. Battery power was at 12%. She toggled to manual focus, adjusting by instinct. The weapon was a relic, an old Terran railgun with scars older than some soldiers. It had survived 3 campaigns and 2 planets. She doubted the same could be said for her. The targeting array buzzed faintly in the rain, a sound she could feel in her teeth. The aliens had taken everything else. Her unit, her captain, the evac ship that never came. Even the sky. The Dominion ships hung there now, veiled by the storm but visible in flashes of lightning, like gods that had turned away. The thought ignited a cold ember in her chest. The Dominion believed humans were done, scattered remnants clinging to drowned worlds. Let them believe it. She watched the patrol pause near the ruins of the communications tower. Their drones cast moving halos over the water. When one of those halos swept across her position, she didn't blink. The drone moved on, fooled by the thick coat of mud dulling her body's heat. She waited until it drifted behind a tree before exhaling softly, counting the seconds between thunder. Timing was everything. Her first shot earlier had been too clean. She had meant it as a warning, not a massacre. But they didn't learn. They never did. The aliens advanced again, ignorant of how sound bends across water. She shifted slightly, just enough to realign her scope. Her body was a lattice of tension. Any movement too fast would send ripples. She slowed her breathing until it matched the rhythm of the rain. Through her lens, she saw one of them break formation to retrieve a fallen comrade. She squeezed the trigger. The railgun's recoil pressed into her shoulder like a heartbeat. A pulse of light streaked through the storm and found its mark. The alien folded silently into the water. She tracked the others as they spun in confusion, their comms flashing with static. Good. Let them talk. Every burst of panic gave away their positions. Lira wiped the rain from her cheek and murmured to herself, 2 down. 18 to go. Her voice sounded alien in her own ears. Raspy, hollow, a whisper borrowed from the swamp. A memory intruded. Her captain's face streaked with ash, shouting over the din of artillery. If they come again, make them regret ever landing. She had promised. Promises were rare currency now. She would spend hers wisely. Lightning revealed the terrain in an instant. Broken hulls, drowned trees, shattered helmets half buried in silt. This place had been her home for 3 months, and she knew every channel, every depth. Beneath the surface lay tunnels carved by ancient rivers. If she needed to vanish, she could. If she needed to strike again, she would. She adjusted her position, sliding backward into the water until only her eyes and scope remained above. The cold bit into her skin, but discomfort no longer mattered. Hunger, fatigue, fear, these had been trained out of her long before the war began. What remained was the mission. Survive, observe, eliminate. Another drone approached. Its light wavered over the water like a restless spirit. Lira held her breath as it hovered closer, its sensor array scanning. Her rifle's magnetic coil emitted a faint hum, too soft for any untrained ear, but she flinched anyway. The drone tilted as if listening. For a moment, she thought she'd been caught. Then thunder boomed overhead, masking everything. She fired again. The drone shattered, fragments scattering like insects into the dark. Immediately, return fire tore through the air. Plasma bolts hissed into the swamp, sending pillars of steam upward. She ducked beneath the surface, water filling her ears. The world became muffled, distant. She stayed under until the vibrations ceased. When she emerged, she was several meters from her last position. They would waste time firing into the wrong spot. That was her gift to them, time spent in fear instead of reason. She crawled onto a half-submerged log and steadied her rifle once more. Through the rain, she spotted the commander barking orders, his armor glowing faintly from internal energy cells. Every movement was efficient, practiced. He wasn't a fool. She could respect that. But she also knew that command breeds predictability. He would reposition. For a perimeter, send out scouts. She smiled thinly. That pattern would get him killed. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but exhaustion. She hadn't slept in 32 hours. Her rations were gone. The nutrient injector in her suit had jammed days ago. Only adrenaline kept her anchored. Yet fatigue had its uses. It made her movements slower, more deliberate. The human body adapts, she thought. The Dominion never understood that. A faint beep drew her attention to the rifle's interface. Power at 6%. The next few shots might be her last before the weapon went silent. She considered retreating deeper into the swamp tunnels, but something inside her refused. If she withdrew, they would regroup and call orbital fire. The swamp would vanish in flames, and the story of her unit would end here, unremembered. That was unacceptable. She closed her eyes briefly and whispered the names of her fallen team. When she opened them, her focus returned with surgical clarity. She aimed at the commander again, but a smaller alien crossed into her scope, helmet flashing with symbols. It looked young. She hesitated, then adjusted upward. The shot instead struck the commander's shoulder plate, enough to send him sprawling. A warning, again. She wasn't a butcher. The squad reacted instantly, firing into the mist, their formation crumbling under panic. Lira retreated deeper into the reeds, dragging her rifle behind her. Each step was calculated, silent. She moved like the current, never straight, never predictable. The aliens shouted in their own language, harsh and guttural, but she could hear fear beneath it. Fear was universal. Minutes passed. The storm thickened. Her visor displayed erratic readings from electromagnetic interference. Somewhere overhead, the Dominion ships adjusted orbit. She ignored them. Her war was here, small and personal. She found shelter beneath the twisted roots of a fallen tree and checked her ammunition. 3 slugs remained, enough to change the night's balance. She reloaded, listening to the faint hum of her weapon. Her reflection wavered in the puddle below, a ghost staring back through streaks of mud and blood. The sight almost made her laugh. The Dominion wanted to erase humanity, yet here she was, one soldier against a platoon, and they couldn't even find her. A new sound drifted through the storm, voices closer than before. They were tightening their search. She steadied her rifle, aligning her sights with the gap between the roots. The first shadow crossed the clearing. Her finger brushed the trigger, but didn't pull. She waited. Patience was her greatest weapon. Another figure followed, then another. The formation moved cautiously now, low and silent. She could feel the commander's influence, discipline reasserting itself. Good. That made them predictable again. When the third soldier stepped into range, she fired. The rail slug cut through armor and bone with a wet crack. The body fell forward, splashing. The others reacted instantly, but she was already moving, sliding backward into the dark water, vanishing like a ripple. She surfaced minutes later, lungs burning, vision swimming. The swamp glowed faintly around her from plasma residue. She exhaled slowly and allowed herself a single moment of stillness. Somewhere in the chaos, she imagined the commander looking for her, wondering how a single human could turn his hunt into a nightmare. "Welcome to Delta 4, she whispered, the rain catching her words and scattering them into the mist. The rain showed no sign of ending, and neither did the silence that followed each shot. Commander Vek'Tor stood waist-deep in the swamp, the cold water seeping through fractures in his armor. His squad had been reduced by nearly half, their remains drifting somewhere beneath the black surface. Every tactical principle he had mastered was crumbling beneath a single human's will. The Dominion had conquered empires with precision and efficiency, but nothing in their doctrine accounted for this. One creature who refused to die quietly. "Signal integrity at 40%, reported the adjutant, his voice trembling beneath the static. "We're losing drone control entirely." "Then rely on your eyes," Vek'Tor replied. His voice was low, steady, but each word tasted of rust. He scanned the dense mist, where the swamp seemed alive, shifting with unseen intent. The rain had thickened to a curtain. He could barely see beyond 20 meters, and that blind distance might as well have been the edge of the world. He remembered the first time he had faced humans on the battlefield, on Varney's Prime, where they fought like cornered predators. Their technology had been outdated, their weapons primitive, yet they'd won through sheer audacity. They had burned their own cities rather than surrender them. He had admired their defiance once. Now it irritated him. He wanted order, not chaos. "Commander," the adjutant whispered, "the men are frightened. They speak of phantoms. Perhaps we." A sharp motion from Vek'Tor silenced him. "Phantoms do not shoot with precision. Find the human." He turned, watching the ripples around his soldiers. The swamp reflected their movement in distorted rings. Somewhere beneath those ripples, the human waited. He could feel her presence like an invisible thread coiled around his mind. Every decision she forced him to make tightened it. Miles away, under the same rain, Sergeant Lira Morgan moved through the roots of a fallen tree. Her body ached with cold, her muscles screaming from exhaustion, but her focus remained absolute. She had seen the commander stagger after a last shot, and the image lingered with satisfaction. Still, she knew better than to celebrate. Wounding a predator only made it more dangerous. She crawled up a mound of moss and adjusted her rifle's sights, aligning with the flicker of alien lights in the distance. The power meter blinked red, 5%. The next few rounds would have to count. She checked her backup pistol, but its ammunition chamber was empty. There would be no fallback. The swamp whispered against her ears, its rhythm merging with her pulse. Through her scope, she caught glimpses of movement. The commander directing his troops, methodical and unyielding despite his losses. His discipline impressed her. Most alien officers broke after the second or third casualty. This one didn't flinch. That made him the real threat. She whispered to herself, "You're adapting, aren't you?" Vek'Tor, as if sensing her gaze, paused mid-step. His helmet's optics pulsed faintly as he surveyed the terrain. "Thermal sweep, grid pattern," he ordered. The remaining drones formed a lattice of scanning light, methodically mapping the swamp. Lira exhaled slowly. The light waves would expose her if she stayed still. She slid backward into the water, submerging her rifle, her heart hammering as the grid passed inches above her head. Bubbles escaped her nose and drifted upward like fragile ghosts. One wrong breath, and it would all end. The light moved on. She surfaced silently and wiped the mud from her scope. The grid had narrowed their perimeter. Good. It meant they were desperate. Desperation led to predictability. She maneuvered into a new position, crouching between the exposed roots of a mangrove. From here, she could see their formation clearly. They were forming a half circle, herding the swamp inward, tightening the noose. They didn't realize she'd already slipped behind them. Vek'Tor activated his helmet comm, focus on the sound of water displacement. Humans cannot move without disturbing it. Lira smiled faintly. "Watch the water, Commander." She dipped her hand into the current and flicked a stone several meters away. A splash echoed. Instantly, the aliens turned and opened fire. Plasma bolts erupted in wild arcs, dissolving trees and mud alike. While they fired, she took aim at one of the drones circling above them. A single shot reduced it to shrapnel, and the squad froze again, blinded by the sudden burst of sparks. The commander's roar cut through the storm. "Stop firing. You reveal your positions." But his control was slipping. Fear had spread through his ranks like poison. He turned sharply, scanning the tree line. The human was close. He could feel it. He switched his optics to ultraviolet and caught faint disturbances in the reeds, movements that didn't match the wind. He raised his weapon and fired 3 short bursts. Mud exploded, but no body surfaced. Then from the opposite side, another of his soldiers screamed. Lira's third shot tore through the trooper's chest plate. She shifted again, every move deliberate, conserving strength. Each shot brought her closer to exposure, but retreat was no longer an option. Vek'Tor's breathing quickened. He began to understand the truth. This wasn't a chaotic engagement. It was a hunt, and he was the prey. He forced himself to focus. The human was wounded, tired. She couldn't maintain this forever. If he anticipated her pattern, he could outlast her. He raised his arm, signaling to his remaining soldiers. Converge. Tight formation. Advance slow. Lira observed them regrouping. The commander's logic was sound. Compressing the formation limited her angles. He was learning fast. She felt a flicker of admiration mixed with dread. She couldn't win through patience anymore. She would have to risk exposure. She crawled up onto a narrow ridge of roots, water dripping from her uniform. The wind shifted, carrying the acrid scent of plasma discharge. Her vision blurred briefly, and she wiped blood from her cheek. A fragment of shrapnel had grazed her earlier without her noticing. The pain grounded her, reminded her she was still alive. She steadied her rifle, aiming at the commander. The crosshair wavered once, then held. Vek'Tor's gaze turned instinctively toward her direction, though he couldn't possibly see her. He felt it again, that primal tension that defied logic. He leveled his own weapon and fired. The blast tore through the roots beside her, spraying mud across her visor. She rolled aside and fired back. The slug clipped his shoulder guard, spinning him halfway around. He stumbled but didn't fall. Their eyes met across the rain-drenched distance, two predators recognizing each other. He raised his rifle again, but his hand trembled. It wasn't from pain, it was realization. This human wasn't just defending territory, she was avenging something. Every calculated shot, every moment of silence carried purpose. He saw it now, and it unsettled him more than her aim. Lightning flared above them, transforming the swamp into a battlefield of silver reflections. Both fire at once. Her shot grazed his armor. It struck her flank, searing through her suit. She collapsed into the water, gasping, the pain spreading through her ribs. The rifle slipped from her grasp. She reached for it, fingers slick with blood, but the current tugged it away. Vek'Tor advanced slowly, weapon raised. Surrender, he called through the translator. You are one. We are many. She laughed, the sound low and hoarse. You sure about that? The rain drowned her words, but he felt the defiance in them. She pressed her palm to the wound, forcing herself upright. Every movement burned, but she wouldn't die kneeling. Her hand found her sidearm. One last round loaded manually. The commander's silhouette loomed closer, his armor glinting under the lightning. He aimed at her chest. She aimed at his exposed neck joint. For a long moment, neither moved. The storm held its breath with them. Then thunder cracked, and both fired. Vek'Tor staggered backward, the round lodging beneath his collar. His weapon fired wild, scorching the air beside her. He fell to one knee, the swamp swallowing his reflection. Lira collapsed against the roots, her lungs shuddering. The pain dulled to a distant ache. She watched him struggle, trying to rise, and whispered through trembling lips, "Stay down." The rain fell harder, cloaking everything in silver mist. Neither of them knew who would rise first. The rain had softened into a steady whisper by the time the sun began to pale the horizon. The storm had lasted the entire night, swallowing the world in thunder and ghosts. Now the swamp steamed faintly, a landscape of rising mist and drowned roots. The smell of ozone clung to the air like memory. Commander Vek'Tor lay half-submerged, motionless except for the faint pulse of his armor's emergency systems. Each breath came as a labor, his chest plate scorched where the human's round had pierced through. His weapon had slipped from his grasp, sinking somewhere into the dark water. For the first time in his long career, he didn't reach for it. He stared upward at the shifting sky. The alien colors of the dawn refracted through the storm's remnants, scattering violet light across the canopy. He had always considered this planet hostile, filthy, primitive, unworthy of conquest. But now, as the rain tapered to a drizzle, he felt an odd calm settle over him. The silence after chaos was something he hadn't experienced in years. He moved his hand, testing his strength. The servos responded weakly. His system's readout flashed in his visor, biological integrity compromised. He ignored it. Pain was data. The human's bullet had not killed him outright. though it had come close. Across the swamp, Lira Morgan dragged herself onto a patch of higher ground, her body trembling with exhaustion. Every breath scraped against her ribs like sandpaper. The wound at her side had slowed the bleeding, but her strength was fading. She tore a strip from her sleeve and tightened it across her waist. The world swayed around her, light and sound distorting into something dreamlike. Her rifle was gone. She still had her sidearm, empty now, but its weight comforted her. She wasn't ready to let it go. The calm beat in her ear had gone dead hours ago, and she hadn't heard any human frequencies since. She was alone. But then, she had been alone for days before this encounter, ever since the Xel'nari bombardment had erased her unit. She looked across the flooded terrain toward the faint outline of the alien commander. He hadn't moved much. Part of her wanted to finish it, to crawl over and make sure he didn't get back up. But another part, quieter and stranger, hesitated. He could have killed her when she was down, and he hadn't. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe he was just as broken. The wind shifted, carrying the echo of mechanical drones. Distant, faint but real. Reinforcements. Her chest tightened, not from fear, but from the realization that this battle wasn't finished. If the Xel'nari found her, she'd be executed on sight. If humans arrived, they might not recognize her through the mud and blood. Either way, time was thinning. Vek'Tor's comm unit crackled. "Commander, we are inbound. Transponder active. Signal beacon." He cut the transmission before it finished. The sound of his soldiers' voices stirred something bitter in him. They would come expecting a report of victory, of another human exterminated. But what would he tell them? That one woman had dismantled a platoon, that she had turned his discipline against him? No. Dominion doctrine left no room for such stories. Yet he couldn't bring himself to lie about it either. The truth had lodged somewhere deep, like the bullet near his spine. He shifted, groaning, and pulled himself upright. The motion tore at his side, but he didn't care. He needed to see her. Lira heard the splash before she saw him. Her hand went instinctively to her weapon, but she didn't draw it. She simply waited. When his silhouette broke through the mist, towering yet staggering, she felt a strange peace. They had both survived what should have been impossible. He stopped several meters away, his weapon lowered. "You are persistent," he said through the translator. His voice was ragged, almost human in its fatigue. She smirked faintly. "You're still standing. So are you." He regarded her, studying the lines of her face beneath the grime and blood. "Your species fights without reason, even when death is certain." "Maybe that's the reason," she replied. "To prove it isn't." The words hung between them, fragile and honest. Vek'Tor had interrogated countless prisoners, dissected their philosophies, but nothing had ever cut this cleanly. She wasn't boasting or pleading. She was stating a truth he couldn't refute. He took a careful step closer. "Why did you not finish it? Why didn't you?" she countered. He paused. The answer refused to come. He looked away, to the rising light on the water. "Perhaps. I wish to understand what could break me." She laughed softly, a sound that carried more pain than humor. "Guess we both found out." A low rumble rolled across the swamp, the unmistakable hum of engines. "Dropships." Lira looked toward the horizon and saw the faint shimmer of plasma exhaust. The Dominion was coming. Her pulse quickened. She tried to stand, but her leg gave out. Vek'Tor's gaze followed hers. He recognized the pattern of approach, standard extraction formation. His soldiers would secure the area in less than 5 minutes. Protocol demanded that he execute surviving hostiles before retrieval. He reached for his sidearm, hesitated, then let it fall into the water. "Your people will be here soon," she said. "You should go." He shook his head. "They will not find me the same." Lira frowned, unsure what he meant, until she saw him open his gauntlet and pull out the data core from his armor. The device contained every record of this battle: tactical feeds, command logs, casualty data. Without it, there would be no official account. He stared at it for a long moment, then dropped it into the swamp. The splash was small, almost gentle. "You'll be executed for that," she said quietly. "Perhaps, but not for this moment." They both looked toward the approaching lights. The mist turned gold as the first beams cut through it. She felt her body weakening again, the adrenaline fading. She didn't want to pass out. Not yet. He reached into his belt pouch and withdrew a small canister. Medic gel, bright blue against the mud. He tossed it toward her. It landed near her hand. Human physiology is adaptable. Use it. She stared at it, unsure whether to trust him. But survival had always been about taking risks. She tore it open and pressed the gel to her wound. The burn was immediate, followed by a cold numbness that dulled the pain. When she looked up again, he was already retreating into the mist, leaving a faint trail of ripples. "Commander Vek'Tor," she called, her voice hoarse. "Why spare me?" He stopped without turning. "Because extinction teaches nothing." Then he was gone, swallowed by fog and rain. Moments later, the dropships descended. Blades of light swept across the swamp, followed by mechanical voices in a language she couldn't decipher. Lira pressed herself into the mud, half-conscious, watching his armored silhouettes comb the area. She thought she saw him once more at the edge of the clearing, but it might have been a shadow. A beam of white light passed over her face. "Human life signs detected," a voice shouted. "We got one." Hands lifted her, strong and steady. The world blurred again. She caught glimpses of helmets, human, not alien. Relief washed through her like warmth after frost. She tried to speak, but only managed a whisper. "Ghost shooter." The medic leaned closer. "Rest, soldier. You're safe." But as they carried her aboard, her last clear image was of the swamp, still steaming, still endless, and of the faint shape moving far beneath its surface. Something part human, part legend. Commander Vek'Tor stood in the shadows of the mangroves, watching the ship lift into the gray sky. He felt no triumph, no defeat, only the heavy realization that the universe had shifted. The Dominion would call this encounter an anomaly. He knew better. He whispered to the rising dawn, echoing her words, "Maybe that's the reason." The rain began again, soft and endless, as if trying to erase the battlefield, but it couldn't. The swamp remembered, and somewhere deep in its heart, so did they.